Whispers of the Frontier. The Threxal Invasion. Sort of. Kharz was pleased with his new titles: Senior Forward Subjugation Director of the 4th Expeditionary Talon, Acting Voice of the Outer Ascendancy, Provisional Custodian of Conquered Populations, numbering fewer than 11,000. He stood on the command dais and watched the Accord Frontier Station swell across the tactical display. It was not impressive. The installation consisted of a central spindle, 2 habitation rings, a freight wheel, a docking lattice, and several agricultural storage blisters attached wherever the builders had apparently discovered an unused section of hull. Its exterior displayed 14 different construction standards and at least 6 incompatible design philosophies. One docking arm was painted yellow, another was blue, a third had been repaired with bare metal plates and not painted at all. Kharz found the lack of uniformity offensive. "Target defensive capacity?" he asked. Tactical Force Assessor Thelvor stood beside the command platform with all 4 arms folded against his armored chest. His title was much shorter than Kharz, which was appropriate. "Negligible," Thelvor said. 2 commercial defense emitters, 1 customs cutter, 17 station security personnel. No Accord military vessels within immediate response distance. Director Kharz said, "Population? 1,812 permanent residents, 406 transient passengers, and freight personnel. Species distribution is inconsistent." Kharz's chest glowed slightly. "Everything about this installation is inconsistent." Thelvor inclined his wedge-shaped head. "That is accurate." Kharz examined the station again. The Threxal assault carrier Unanswerable Mandate approached beneath a field that reduced its detectable emissions to background radiation. 3 escort vessels followed in precise triangular formation. Beneath the carrier's forward armor waited 240 soldiers of the Ascendancy, 12 boarding cutters, 6 occupation platforms, and enough administrative infrastructure to govern a population 5 times larger than the one ahead. The station's registered name appeared on the display: Morrow's Hitch Agricultural Transfer Cooperative. A secondary designation followed in smaller type: Passenger Annex, Municipal Services Hub, Licensed Commercial Berthing Facility, and Regional Livestock Exchange. Kharz narrowed his concealed visual organs. "Why does it possess 4 classifications?" "The Frontier permits overlapping civil designations," Thelvor said. "Why?" Thelvor extended his lower arms in a brief gesture. "The intelligence report does not explain." Kharz's voice dropped. "Then the intelligence report is deficient. I have marked it for review." That was satisfactory. The Threxal Ascendancy did not conquer territory casually. Every expansion required analysis, authorization, jurisdictional assignment, administrative preparation, and an official determination that conquest would improve the efficiency of the conquered population. The frontier clearly required improvement. It was a disordered outer region belonging to an interstellar government that appeared to value negotiation, local autonomy, private trade, elected administration, species accommodation, and other obstacles to proper command. Threxal intelligence had studied the Accord for 8 years. The core worlds were heavily defended. Accord space was organized and prosperous. Frontier space, however, was scattered across enormous distances. Its settlements relied on independent merchants, lightly armed patrol vessels, irregular supply routes, and local authorities with overlapping responsibilities. It was an obvious point of entry. Morrow's Hitch would become the first lawful acquisition of the Threxal Ascendancy within Accord territory. Kharz's chest organs glowed faintly beneath his armor. He suppressed the reaction. An officer did not display excitement before a conquest. "Begin," he commanded. The unanswerable mandate emerged from concealment. Its transmission system seized the local communications bands before the station could issue an alert. The 2 commercial defense emitters rotated toward the Threxal carrier and were disabled with precise fire. The customs cutter attempted to leave its berth. One Threxal escort vessel placed a particle beam across its projected flight path. The cutter returned to its berth. Broadcast the declaration, Kharz ordered. Thelvor signaled Communications Proclamation Officer Jock. Jock raised his upper arm ceremonially. To all inhabitants of the structure designated Morrow's Hitch Agricultural Transfer Cooperative, he began, his resonating chest chambers filling the bridge with layered thunder. Your installation, attached facilities, movable assets, recognized commercial territories, dependent service zones, and associated population are now subject to the authority of the Threxal Ascendancy. The station did not respond. Continued resistance will result in the immediate application of corrective force. Peaceful submission will preserve essential infrastructure, lawful property classifications, and the lives of all compliant inhabitants. A signal appeared from the station. It was audio only. A human voice said, "Who is this?" Jacques paused. Kharz looked at him, and Jacques resumed. "This is Communications Proclamation Officer Jacques, certified speaker of external seizure notices, authorized herald of expeditionary mandates. Can you call back in 10 minutes?" the human asked. "We've got a feed transfer blockage in Dock 6. The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge as Thelvor's chest seams brightened. Kharz decided not to acknowledge it, instead saying, "Board the station." 12 Threxal cutters crossed the distance in formation. The station's docking control attempted to deny them access, so the cutters attached directly to the outer hull. Shaped breaching charges opened precise entry points through maintenance corridors and unused cargo spaces. Kharz led the primary force personally. The inner hatch of his cutter opened onto a station passageway filled with smoke, flashing amber lights, and frightened civilians. The frontier civilians stared. Kharz understood why. He stood nearly 2.5 meters tall in full conquest armor. Manufactured plates broadened his shoulders around the hooked ridges of his natural shell. 4 arms rested around the heavy particle projector carried across his chest. Crimson light glowed through the seams of his black armor. Behind him came 28 soldiers in perfect formation. The passageway was too narrow for them to advance 3 abreast, so they reorganized instantly into 2 columns without speaking. A human security officer stood at the far end of the corridor with a compact weapon raised in both hands. "Stay back!" Kharz continued forward. The officer fired. The pulse struck Karz's chest plate and dispersed across the armor in a blue-white flash. His stride did not change. The officer fired twice more. The shots were equally ineffective. Kharz stopped within 3 body lengths of him. "Your resistance has been recorded," Kharz said. "It is inadequate." The human leaned slightly and glanced at the soldiers behind Kharz, then placed his weapon on the floor and raised his hands. "Good," Kharz said. "You have selected the efficient option." The occupation proceeded according to plan. Threxal teams secured the docking lattice, engineering access way, traffic control center, freight wheel, and communications core. Station security offered limited resistance. No Threxal soldier suffered meaningful injury. Several humans attempted to barricade a passenger concourse using luggage carts. The barricade lasted 4 seconds. A Pirella maintenance worker escaped through a ventilation access barely large enough for Kharz's lower arm. A Grusk cargo supervisor refused to abandon a loading platform until the Threxal soldiers provided a written order. They provided one, and the Grusk read the entire document before complying. Within 23 minutes, every major station system was under Threxal control, and the population had been directed into designated assembly zones. 37 minutes after the breaching charges fired against the hull, Kharz entered the central administrative concourse to receive formal surrender. The chamber had once been intended to impress visitors. Its high ceiling contained a holographic representation of the surrounding trade routes. Glass-fronted offices lined the upper level. Information kiosks stood among benches, decorative plants, and food dispensers. A large illuminated sign read, "Welcome to Morrow's Hitch." Someone had attached a smaller handwritten notice beneath it. "Freight Lift 3 is making that noise again. It has been reported." The station's senior personnel waited beneath the sign. Kharz had ordered them assembled according to authority, and the result was not encouraging. There was a human woman in a gray station services jacket, a nethvik with 2 data slates, and a heavy grusk wearing an orange cargo harness. A parella whose uniform identified her as Assistant Director of Visitor Comfort stood beside a disheveled human agricultural coordinator with mud on his boots. The last person caught Kharz's attention. Standing off to the side was an elderly human wearing an apron that said, "Ask me about today's soup." Kharz looked toward Detention Classification Officer Vortak. "You were instructed to assemble the station's governing authority." Vortak's lower hands moved in a brief pattern of discomfort. "These individuals all claim governing authority." The human woman stepped forward. "I'm Celia Baird, Station Operations Manager." The nethvik raised one narrow manipulatory hand. "Saves the receipts, municipal records, cooperative charter, docking allocations, tax classifications, and emergency procedural continuity." The grusk rumbled, "Dockmaster Harlbrun." The parella smiled nervously, then said, "Miri, Visitor Comfort." The agricultural coordinator said, "Thomas Bell, the Livestock Exchange reports to me when it feels like reporting to anybody." The elderly human in the apron folded his arms. "Len." Kharz waited. Len did not add a title. "What is your function?" Kharz asked. "I run the canteen." "You possess governing authority?" "No," said Len, "but everyone else was coming over here, and I wanted to see what happened." Vortak's chest seams glowed with embarrassment. Kharz turned back toward Celia Baird. "You will surrender the station." "Can't," Director Baird said. The answer was so immediate that Kharz suspected a translation malfunction. "You are physically capable of speech. You are therefore capable of surrender." "I mean, I can't surrender the station." The 2 lower arms of Director Kharz waved. "You are the Station Operations Manager." She sighed. "That doesn't make me the owner." "Who owns it?" Celia glanced at Saves the Receipts. The nethvik consulted a slate. "The cooperative is owned proportionally by 173 registered agricultural producers, the Morrow Municipal Authority, 6 independent freight associations, the Passenger Access Trust, and a Valori Hospitality Consortium holding a non-voting structural interest." Kharz stared at the nethvik. "Who possesses authority to surrender?" "That depends upon whether the surrender is classified as a transfer of municipal control, commercial assets, agricultural infrastructure, cooperative property, navigational authority, or passenger service obligations." "It is all of those," said Kharz. Saves the Receipt said, "Then no single individual possesses the necessary authority." Kharz's lower right hand curled. This was not resistance, it was worse. It was imprecision. "You will convene the necessary authorities." "The cooperative board won't have a quorum for another 3 weeks," Celia said. "You are under military occupation." She shrugged. "Yeah, that'll probably affect attendance." Kharz stepped closer. The station manager was much smaller than he was. She had no visible weapon. Her pulse was elevated, and moisture had gathered along her forehead. She was afraid, yet her posture suggested annoyance. This was a frontier characteristic the intelligence reports had not adequately explained. "The ascendancy does not require your internal procedures," Kharz said. "You will acknowledge our authority." Celia looked past him. A Threxal soldier had placed one heavy foot on a yellow line painted across the floor. "Could you ask him to move?" Kharz's head turned 3 degrees. "Why?" "That's the emergency access lane," she replied. Kharz gestured toward his assembled soldiers. "The emergency has already occurred." "No, this is an invasion. We might still have an emergency," Celia said. Several humans nearby made brief choking noises. The translator identified the sounds as suppressed laughter. Kharz raised his shoulders, and the concourse became silent. "You will comply," he said. Celia inhaled slowly. Then she looked directly at the dark plates concealing his visual organs. "I'd like to file a complaint." Kharz's entire body became still. The translation reached him twice, first as ordinary accord speech, then as the ancient legal equivalent embedded in the deepest procedural architecture of the Threxal language. "I invoke the petition of grievance before authority." Every Threxal weapon in the concourse lowered. The movement was involuntary only in the sense that obedience to law had become indistinguishable from instinct. Kharz heard the armor joints of 27 soldiers settle around him. Celia looked from one Threxal to another, then back at Senior Director Kharz. "What?" Kharz's chest organs flashed crimson. He suppressed them with great effort. "Your complaint has been formally recognized," he said. "State the authority under which your grievance is submitted." Celia blinked. "My what?" "The jurisdictional basis of your complaint." "I don't know. Visitor comfort?" The translator searched for an equivalent and produced 12 possible legal categories. Kharz rejected all of them. "Clarify," he demanded. Celia's eyes narrowed. "You invaded my station." "This is established." She motioned to a station map. "You blew holes in 3 maintenance corridors." "Necessary tactical entry," he said. She continued. "You shut down communications, damaged docking arm 2, scared half the passengers, detained security staff, and parked that enormous ship across 6 reserved approach lanes." Kharz's lower hands began accessing the complaint protocols stored within his armor. "Are these separate grievances or a unified complaint?" The woman crossed her arms. "Oh, I've got more." A faint noise came from behind Celia. Len, the canteen operator, had covered his mouth with one hand. Kharz ignored him. "Under the right of formal complaint," Kharz said, "all actions directly related to the grievance are suspended pending initial classification." Celia looked toward the soldiers. "So you can't keep invading." "We may maintain completed security actions necessary to preserve order," Kharz said. "We may not proceed with disputed seizures until the complaint is categorized." "What about detaining people?" "If their detention is directly related to the disputed occupation, continued confinement may constitute an unresolved secondary action." Celia grinned. "Then I'm complaining about that too." Kharz looked toward Vortak. The sub-officer lowered all 4 arms. "Detention authority is now procedurally contested." "Release station security personnel to supervise status," Kharz ordered. Celia turned toward Miri. The Perella's rounded ears had risen as far as they could. "Miri, go tell everyone nobody's being detained right now." "Gladly." The Perella took 3 quick steps, and a Threxal soldier moved to block her. Celia raised one finger. "I'll complain." The soldier stepped aside. Miri ran from the concourse as Kharz felt something cold move beneath his chest armor. The grievance was expanding. "Your complaint will now be heard," he said. "You will provide each allegation in sequence." "Do I get a representative?" Kharz accessed the protocol. A complainant may designate one advisory voice. "I want him." Celia pointed toward Saves the Receipts. The Neththik's antennae lifted. "I accept." Kharz had preferred the Neththik when it was merely explaining ownership. It looked competent. A portable command table was brought into the concourse. Kharz stood on one side with Thelvor and Administrative Legitimacy Officer Senkor. Celia stood on the other side with Saves the Receipts. The remaining station officials and one canteen operator gathered behind them. Len had brought a chair from the canteen and sat down. No Threxal protocol explicitly prohibited this. "First grievance," Kharz said. Celia placed both hands on the table. "You didn't give us proper notice." "Our proclamation was transmitted before boarding." 4 minutes before boarding." "Correct." "That," she said, "isn't proper notice." Senkor accessed the invasion mandate. "Ascendancy Expeditionary Doctrine requires notice before forcible entry. It does not specify a minimum interval for unrecognized external territories." Saves the Receipts made a soft clicking sound. "The station's commercial berthing code requires foreign operators to provide 6 standard hours of notice before unscheduled physical attachment to the hull." "We are not a commercial operator," Kharz said. "You have seized a commercial installation," the Neththik said. "Yes?" Saves the Receipts antennae straightened. "You therefore claim a controlling interest in its commercial operations." "That does not make the Ascendancy a commercial operator." "It will make you the successor operator," Saves the Receipts said. Senkor's lower fingers moved rapidly. His search found that the issue was not immediately dismissible. Kharz's dislike of the Neththik increased. Second grievance, he said. You damaged docking arm 2. Kharz's shoulder ridges rose. It fired upon us. Celia looked at Heidland. The Grusk dockmaster stepped forward with great deliberation. It didn't. Docking arms are not weaponized. Kharz turned toward Thelver, who examined the tactical records. The emitter attached to docking arm 2 fired upon us, Thelvor said. Heidland nodded. The emitter is owned by Accord Customs. The docking arm is owned by the Cooperative. You damaged the docking arm while returning fire against separate government property. Kharz's upper hands tightened around the command table. Damage occurring during lawful conquest is subject to later administrative disposition. Good, Celia said. Then you admit you owe us for it. I admit nothing, Kharz said. You just said it was subject to disposition. Disposition may include denial. Then deny it. I do not possess compensation adjudication authority. Celia spread her hands. Who does? Kharz searched the attached expeditionary titles and found that no officer aboard the unanswerable mandate possessed civilian structural compensation authority. An appointed acquisitions assessor. Is one here? No? Then I want to speak to whoever's in charge. The translator rendered the phrase as a formal escalation request. Senkor emitted a low, involuntary tone while Kharz stared at the human. She did not appear to understand what she had done. Escalation has been recognized, Kharz said. Celia glanced at Saves the Receipts. The Nethik made a small notation on his slate while Kharz opened a secure channel to the unanswerable mandate. Connect me to Supreme Expeditionary Authorization Marshal Grothaver. The response came from the carrier's communications core. Marshal Grothavar is reviewing the seizure of the customs cutter. Interrupt him, Kharz ordered. His review is classified as Command Essential. Kharz's lower arms flexed. Inform him that a petition of grievance has been escalated. There was a pause before the channel connected. Grothavar appeared above the command table as a dark, armored projection. He was old for a Threxal. The edges of his natural plates had faded toward iron gray, and the hooked ridges above his shoulders had been reinforced with ceremonial metal. State the grievance, he said. Kharz summarized. Grothaver remained motionless for a moment, then addressed Celia. I am Supreme Expeditionary Authorization Marshal Grothaver, final voice of the 4th Expansion Mandate, bearer of Unified Seizure Authority for independent commercial installations, unaligned orbital assets, and populations not exceeding 3 million sentients. Your complaint has been transferred to my authority. Celia nodded slowly. Okay. Did you authorize them to damage the docking arm? Grothavar's facial plates did not move. I authorized the seizure of the installation. That wasn't my question. Grothavar sounded incredulous. The docking arm is part of the installation. It's cooperative property. The gun was customs property. On the display, Grothavar looked toward Kharz, who could see the same procedural conclusion forming in the marshal's mind. The distinction was absurd, but it was also real. Structural damage compensation does not fall within my title, Grothavar said. Then I want your manager, Celia said. The projection vanished. Not because Grothavar had ended the transmission. The marshal had severed the channel so quickly that the hologram collapsed before the carrier could complete the usual termination signal. Celia looked at Kharz. Was that a yes? Your escalation request exceeds the available expeditionary hierarchy. So there's nobody in charge? Kharz placed the manipulators of both lower arms on the table. There are many individuals in charge. Just not of this. Kharz's chest glowed brighter, and Senkor shifted slightly away from him. Third grievance, Kharz said. You shut down station communications. Necessary to prevent military warning. That also shut down medical telemetry to 3 farms on the moon. Kharz looked toward Thelvor. The tactical assessor accessed the station network map. The communications relay services external agricultural sites. Celia nodded. One of them has a Horathi hatchery clinic. Kharz's lower arms went still. Ascendancy occupation law required the preservation of dependent medical systems unless the systems presented a direct military threat. Restore medical telemetry, he ordered. Thelver sent the instruction. Only medical telemetry, Kharz added. Celia glanced toward the upper offices, where a human technician behind the glass raised both thumbs. Kharz suspected the gesture carried significance to humans. Fourth grievance, he said. Celia crossed her arms. The surrender notice wasn't accessible. It was transmitted in Accord Standard. We've got residents who don't use Accord Standard, she said. The station translation network should have converted it. She pointed at Kharz. You disabled the station network. Kharz's upper right gripping digit pressed into the command table hard enough to leave a shallow dent. Celia looked at the dent. That's another complaint. You have damaged station furniture. By the time the initial grievance hearing reached its 19th issue, the occupation had ceased to resemble an occupation. Threxal soldiers remained positioned throughout the station, but every major action had become entangled in the complaint. Cargo seizures were suspended because ownership classifications had not been resolved. Passenger confinement was suspended because the Passenger Access Trust possessed independent legal standing. The agricultural exchange could not be occupied under commercial seizure authority because parts of it were classified as municipal food infrastructure. A livestock holding area contained 32 enormous animals called Steinholtz Ridgebacks, one of which had rammed 3 soldiers across the enclosure before reinforcements distracted it with a feed bucket. Threxal intelligence was having difficulty classifying the livestock. They were categorized either as industrial protein stock or as trained bioweapons. According to Thomas Bell, the animals were privately owned breeding companions. Kharz did not understand the distinction. The complaint process did, and additional reports arrived continuously. Senior Director, Vortak said over the internal channel, station security personnel have resumed patrol. Why? Kharz asked. They claim that because detention has been suspended, their employment obligations remain active. Disarm them, Kharz ordered. They state that their weapons are licensed safety equipment rather than military arms, Vortak said. Confiscate the equipment. After a pause, Vortak said, they have requested clarification regarding whether confiscation constitutes a new property seizure under the pending grievance. Kharz looked across the table at Celia. She smiled. It was a small human expression that Kharz had begun to recognize as a threat. Permit them to patrol without weapons, he said. They are now carrying fire extinguishers, Vortak said. That is acceptable. Several Threxal soldiers report that the security personnel are standing behind them and making notes. Some of the security personnel are laughing. Kharz ended the channel. Another report followed from the freight wheel. Tactical Force Assessor, a squad commander said, civilian cargo operations have resumed. Thelver asked, why were they permitted to resume? The complainant alleges that interruption of freight services violates the station's cooperative charter. Administrative Legitimacy Officer Senkor has not issued a ruling. Kharz looked toward Senkor, whose 4 hands were moving across 3 separate data fields. The charter contains contradictory emergency clauses, he said. Resolve them. One clause grants the station manager authority to preserve freight movement during external disruption, Senkor said, then halted under military authority. Senkor gave the Threxal equivalent of a sigh. A second clause defines any authority operating the station during an emergency as a temporary service contractor. Silence followed. Kharz said, we are not a service contractor. Celia leaned toward Saves the Receipts. Tell him about the temporary operator fee. The Neth-Thick consulted his slate. Temporary service contractors are billed per occupied docking interval. Thelvor's chest seams flickered. Kharz turned slowly toward Celia. You intend to charge the Ascendancy for invading you. You're using the berths. We did not enter through the berths, he said. That's true. You damaged the hull instead. Len returned from the canteen carrying a tray. He placed a mug before Celia, then one before Saves the Receipts. He looked at Kharz. Coffee? No. Probably for the best. Doubt you could handle it. Len sat down again. Kharz had faced armed resistance on 7 worlds. He had commanded atmospheric assaults, orbital sieges, and the suppression of a mineral colony revolt that lasted 86 days. He had never hated a canteen operator before. Senior Director, Thelver said quietly. What? An Accord patrol vessel has entered the system. Kharz's attention sharpened. Classification? Light patrol corvette. It will reach weapons range in 42 minutes. Prepare the escorts, Kharz ordered. Celia raised a hand. I have a question. This hearing concerns the station occupation, Kharz said. Are you about to start a battle next to the station? If the patrol vessel interferes, Celia smiled. I'm adding that to the complaint. You cannot complain about an action that has not occurred. Saves the receipt's antenna angled forward. Under petition subsection 12, a complainant may request preventive review when a proposed action could materially affect the subject of an unresolved grievance. Senkor stopped moving. Kharz looked at him. Is that correct? Senkor answered with visible reluctance. Yes. Celia folded her arms again. I'm requesting preventive review. On what basis? Kharz's voice dropped low enough to vibrate the mugs on the table. You're considering firing military weapons near a civilian station while we're still arguing about the damage you already caused. Kharz threw all four arms wide. The patrol vessel is a military threat. Then leave, Celia said. We are conquering this installation. Not very well. Kharz's chest blazed red. Every human in the concourse took one step backward. Celia did not. Her fear remained visible in her pulse and breathing. She was not unaware of the danger. She simply continued anyway. Kharz respected courage. At that moment, he found it extremely inconvenient. Senior Director, Senkor said, the preventive complaint requires us to assess whether engagement would compromise the complainant's access to remedy. Of course it would compromise her access, Kharz said. A military battle may destroy the station. Celia pointed at Senkor. Put that in the record. Senkor did, and Kharz closed all four hands, his upper claws pressing against the manufactured grips of his armor. Kharz turned to Thelvor. Can the escorts engage beyond the station perimeter? Thelvor calculated. The patrol vessel may remain outside escort range while transmitting an emergency beacon. Destroy the beacon? That would constitute engagement, Senkor said. Celia lifted her hand again. Kharz turned away from her. Do not speak. I'm just saying I'll complain. Kharz's tone was incensed. You have already complained. I can do it again. The translator marked the statement as procedurally valid. Kharz contacted the unanswerable mandate. Status of Central Authorization Review? The carrier's legal corps answered. Supreme Expeditionary Authorization Marshal Grothavar has referred the installation classification question to the Office of External Territorial Definitions. Estimated response? Kharz asked. Between 3 and 9 standard days. Kharz's jaw seemed open slightly. The pale grinding teeth behind it remained hidden from the humans. We have 40 minutes, he said. Expedited review may be requested by an officer holding emergency definitional priority. His lower manipulator struck the table. Who aboard this force holds that authority? No one. After a long pause, Kharz asked, who within the Ascendancy holds it? Deputy Urgency Registrar Pelkarin of the Central Expansion Secretariat. Contact him. The legal corps responded, Deputy Registrar Pelkarin is outside communication range. Then who may act in his absence? The legal corps processed. His designated alternate. Contact the alternate, Kharz ordered. The position is vacant. Kharz stared at the ceiling, where the decorative trade route hologram rotated above him. Hundreds of tiny lights marked frontier settlements, stations, colonies, and waypoints, disordered, scattered, and improperly classified, full of humans who might at any moment ask to file a complaint. A new communication arrived from the patrol corvette, and Thelvor placed it on the table. A human male appeared in the hologram, wearing the dark uniform of the Accord Frontier Patrol Service. This is Captain George McCarthy of the AFPS, Reasonable Doubt. Morrow's Hitch, please confirm your status. Celia leaned toward the projection. We've been invaded, Captain. Kharz placed one upper hand between her and the transmitter. This installation is under the authority of the Threxal Ascendancy. Captain McCarthy studied him. Never heard of you. You will. Possibly. Are the civilians safe? McCarthy asked. Celia raised her voice. We're in a complaint hearing. The captain looked toward her from the holographic display. A what? They have to stop invading if you file a complaint. Kharz struck the command table, and the dent deepened. You will not disclose protected ascendancy procedure to an external military force. Celia looked at the table. That's another dent in station furniture. Captain McCarthy's expression changed, and Kharz immediately recognized the same dangerous human smile. I'd like to file a complaint, the captain said. All the Threxal in the room lowered their weapons again. Some had already been holding them low. They lowered them farther as Kharz's vision darkened at the edges. You are not subject to Threxal authority, he said. You just claimed authority over the station and its associated traffic zone. The captain's smile widened. My ship is in the associated traffic zone. Saves the receipts checked the station map. That is correct. Kharz pointed one lower hand at the net thick. You are the complainant's advisory voice. You are not the patrol vessel's advisory voice. I was confirming an astrographic fact. Captain McCarthy continued. My complaint is that your carrier is obstructing a designated emergency approach corridor. Thelvor checked the approach map and found that the unanswerable mandate was obstructing 3 of them. Move the carrier, Kharz ordered. To where? Thelvor asked. Outside the emergency corridors. That places it within the agricultural launch exclusion zone, Thelvor said. Celia said, You can't park there. Kharz made a sound that caused the command table's surface to vibrate. Is there any location near this station where the carrier may lawfully remain? Saves the Receipts consulted his slate. There are 17 temporary anchorage zones. Select one. All are currently reserved, the Neththik said. For whom? Kharz asked. 2 grain haulers, a Harathi medical transport, 1 Valori passenger liner, 6 independent freight vessels, a livestock carrier, an automated tug, and 5 scheduled arrivals that have not yet entered the system. They are not present. Saves the Receipts said, reservations remain valid until the end of the docking interval. Kharz turned to Celia. Cancel them. She said, I can't. Kharz pointed 2 manipulators at her. You are the station operations manager. The berthing office does that. Who controls the berthing office? He asked. Miri. He looked around to find that the Pirella was no longer in the concourse. Where is she? Celia looked toward the passenger ring. Probably making sure everyone knows how to file a complaint. Kharz's chest glow became bright enough to reflect from the metal table. Thelvor leaned closer. Senior Director, the occupation's legal position is deteriorating rapidly. I am aware. The patrol vessel has begun transmitting information about the grievance procedure, Thelvor said quietly. To whom? All local channel, Thelvor said. Jam it, Kharz ordered. Celia inhaled and Kharz raised one upper finger. Do not. She closed her mouth. Kharz examined the tactical display. The raid had achieved complete military success. The station's defenses were neutralized and its security force had surrendered. Every vital system lay within Threxal reach. The patrol corvette could not defeat the unanswerable mandate and its escorts in direct combat. Yet the ascendancy could not complete the conquest. Not because of resistance, because no officer present possessed authority over the exact kind of place they had conquered. A notification appeared from the ship's legal corps. Expedited classification response received. Kharz straightened. Display it. Text filled the table. Preliminary finding. Morrow's Hitch may not qualify as an independent commercial installation under 4th expansion mandate definitions. The concourse became very quiet as Kharz read the remainder. The station's commercial functions were substantial. So were its municipal functions. Its agricultural cooperative status complicated ownership, and its passenger annex possessed a separate legal identity. The installation might therefore be classified as a mixed-use regional civic asset. The 4th Expeditionary Talon's mandate did not authorize the seizure of mixed-use regional civic assets. A final line appeared. Recommended action, Suspend acquisition pending definitive jurisdictional review. Kharz read the finding twice. Then he read it a third time in case the words had altered out of respect for him. They had not. Celia leaned across the table. So? Kharz looked at her. His soldiers had breached the station, and ascendancy weapons controlled the space around it. His title authorized him to conquer populations numbering fewer than 11,000, but it did not authorize him to conquer this particular collection of shops, farms, passenger berths, docking arms, public services, and livestock pens. The occupation is suspended, he said. Len lifted his mug. Does suspended mean you're leaving? It means the acquisition cannot proceed until the target's legal classification is resolved. How long will that take? Celia asked. Between 3 and 9 standard days. Celia shook her head. You can't stay here that long. Kharz leaned forward. We are not requesting permission, she said. You're blocking traffic. We will move to a temporary anchorage. They're all reserved, Saves the Receipts interjected. Kharz's vertical mouth opened. The sides of his lower face separated enough to reveal the first row of pale teeth, causing several of the observing humans, including Celia Baird, to step backward. Len did not. The old human took a drink from his mug. Kharz closed his mouth and said, Threxal forces will withdraw beyond the station traffic perimeter. Captain McCarthy's hologram remained above the table. That sounds sensible. This is not a surrender, Kharz said. McCarthy smiled. Wouldn't dream of calling it one. This is an administrative suspension of acquisition activity pending clarification of external territorial definitions. Of course, McCarthy said. The ascendancy retains the right to return. Captain McCarthy looked toward Celia. Celia looked toward Saves the Receipts. The Neththik made another notation. Kharz pointed toward them. No further complaints will be accepted during withdrawal unless they concern immediate threats to sapient life. Celia raised her hand. Does damage to station property count? No. What about your unpaid docking fees? Kharz said, We have not docked. You have 12 ships attached to the hull right now, Celia said. That's docking. But we have... Kharz stopped when he saw her smile. Do you need a receipt? She asked innocently. Kharz turned away, motioning to Thelvor, who moved forward to receive a data chit from Saves the Receipts. Thelvor passed the chit to him. Kharz reviewed the Accord credit amount owed. His shoulder ridges drooped before he forced them back into position. The withdrawal required 34 minutes. Every Threxal unit departed with disciplined order. Every weapon, occupation platform, administrative terminal, and restraint device was accounted for. The security teams restored control of station systems as Threxal forces vacated them. The breach points remained, as did the dent in the command table. Saves the Receipts had added them to the bill. As Kharz approached the cutter, Heidland waited beside the damaged corridor and held out a slate. You must acknowledge receipt of the structural damage report, Heidland rumbled. Kharz continued walking, and the Grusk stepped into his path. You are withdrawn under a suspended acquisition. Damage accountability remains unresolved. Kharz stopped. The Grusk was shorter than Kharz, though not by much. His mineral-plated body was broad and dense, and he did not appear intimidated. Kharz signed the report with one lower hand. Heidland examined the signature. You have signed on the witness line. Kharz took the slate back and signed again. The Grusk nodded. Acceptable. Kharz entered the cutter. As the hatch closed, he saw Celia standing at the far end of the corridor. She lifted one hand. Not in surrender, in farewell. She was smiling. Senior Forward Subjugation Director Kharz of the 4th Expeditionary Talon, acting voice of the Outer Ascendancy, provisional custodian of conquered populations, numbering fewer than 11,000, was sure he would see that smile in his rest cycles. The unanswerable mandate withdrew beyond the traffic perimeter. The Accord patrol corvette remained near the station but did not pursue. Kharz stood once more upon the command platform, facing the tactical display as Morrow's Hitch diminished behind them. Thelvor stood at his side. Senior Director, he said, I have completed a preliminary assessment of the failure. It was not a military failure, Khar's voice filled the bridge. No. It was an intelligence classification failure compounded by an unanticipated invocation of foundational law. Yes, Thelver agreed. Kharz considered this. Then why does it feel like a military failure? Thelvor's lower hands folded together. Because the humans are broadcasting celebratory music. Kharz opened an external audio channel, and music reached the bridge. It was loud, rhythmically inconsistent, and accompanied by station announcements. "Attention all residents," Celia Baird's voice said. "Communications are back. Docking Arm 2 remains closed. Freight Lift 3 is still making that noise. Also, apparently, if the giant armored aliens come back, ask for the manager." Cheers followed. Kharz terminated the channel as Jacques approached from the communications station. "A priority order has arrived from the Central Expansion Secretariat," he said. "Read it," Kharz ordered. Jacques raised his upper arms. "Senior Forward Subjugation Director Kharz is to return to the staging frontier for immediate reassignment." Kharz's chest dimmed. "Reassignment to what?" Jacques continued. "By authority of the Supreme Ascendancy Council, you are hereby appointed Acting Coordinator of Procedurally Contested External Conquest, First Bearer of Emergency Grievance Response Authority, Provisional Supervisor of Jurisdictionally Ambiguous Seizures, and Command Voice of the newly established 5th Expeditionary Compliance Talon." The bridge was silent. Thelvor lowered his head. It might have been respect, though Kharz suspected it might have been an attempt to conceal amusement. Kharz looked again toward the distant frontier and swore by the great god Tanrila that the next Threxal force would carry adjudicators, property assessors, territorial classifiers, compensation officers, municipal status specialists, passenger service authorities, and pre-approved notices of conquest in every major accord language. The next invasion would not be stopped by a station manager and a neththik with 2 data slates. Kharz imagined returning to Morrow's Hitch and finding Celia Baird standing beneath the welcome sign. He imagined her looking up at him and saying the words again. "I would like to file a complaint." His lower hands accessed the newly attached authority files. There were 14,000 pages. A memory of Celia's smile dimmed his chest organs. He began reading. He hoped 14,000 pages would be enough.